Class 4A rankings right here coming your way, week 3. And let me tell you, you're going to want to stick around because we might just have a new number 1 team in this class. But we got to work through the rest of the rankings before we get to that point. I won't waste your time. Let's get right into it. I will say, though, if you're looking for another class or just want to learn more about high school football, go watch the other rankings videos. I do my best to explain how our rankers put it for that week. But be sure to leave a comment if you agree or disagree. But without further ado, here we go. Class 4A, as you can see, starting with 16 through 11. Let me turn my little camera on so you can see me. There we go. Starting at number 16, Gilbert. They took down Carroll last week, who was number 15. So they're going to slot right in. Gilbert 2-0. Nice couple wins over DCG and Carroll. Number 15, Waverly Shell Rock. 0-2, but let me tell you, I think they have had the 2 toughest games so far this year. Started off with Xavier and then had to go play North Scott. Those are 2 really tough wins. They lost to North Scott 49-28. So not enough to knock them out of our top 16 yet. Still a very quality team. And Spencer, same thing. They lost to Webster City, one of the perennials in 3A this year. So not enough to drop them out either. And then at number 13, we got Ballard. They lost to Humboldt 14-13. Almost pulled off a shocker to a top team in Class 3A. So Ballard will fall, or Ballard will hold down the number 13 spot this week. At number 12 and number 11, 2 teams that squared off last week. Norwalk obviously took down Indianola 24-14, but really impressed by both those teams. So both those squads get a promotion in this week's rankings to number 11 and number 12. But without further ado, let's get into the top 10 where the fun begins. Number 10, Glenwood. How about a statement maker by the Rams? A 40-point win over then top 10 3A Atlantic is really something to take note of. Caden Anderson, I've talked about him before. I'll do it again. One of the best quarterbacks in the state of Iowa. He was 10 for 11 for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. But the Rams defense really was a huge story, creating 4 turnovers, including a pick 6 from Cole Stout. So Glenwood 2-0 on the year, holding down the number 10 spot. At number 9, Lamar's balanced attack on all ends during a convincing win over Sioux City North Teakin Castle with 3 touchdowns through the air. They will hold down that number 9 spot this week. At number 8, Newton. They're down 3-0 at halftime at DCG, but this Newton team then woke up in the second half, rattling off 20 straight en route to their win. Caleb Klein, and Caleb Mattis both had 20 carries, 20 carries each, that is, and they combined for 173 yards on the ground. Number 7, Lewis Central. A tough loss for Lewis Central against Creston, but there's some bright spots. Chance Chappell. He was one of the bright spots, rushing for 124 yards on 17 carries. And another good thing, they get a chance to bounce back this week when they draw ADM. I'm not going to say what ADM is ranked. I'm not going to spoil that quite yet. But I will say a good chance for Lewis Central to come out and make a statement and put themselves back into the top 5 mix if they were to hang with and beat the Tigers this week. Rounding out our 10 through 6 rankings, Bondurant Farrar. Hello, Titus Cram. My goodness. 18 carries for 285 and 3 touchdowns en route to a 40-0 win over Grinnell. This kid's special. There's no way to put it. Obviously, they lost to North Polk in a shootout in week 1, but they bounced back and get a huge win over Grinnell. And talking about Waverly Shell Rock and how difficult their schedule is, they go Xavier, North Scott, and now Bondurant Farrar. That is 3 top 10 teams, top 6 teams to start the year for Waverly Shell Rock. Like I said, Bondurant, they're gonna square off with Go Hawks this week. But without further ado, the moment you guys have been waiting for, our top 5. Yes, you can see a new number 1 team in class. That should say Class 4A. I'm sorry, it says Class 3A. It should be Class 4A. Typo. I've been doing these all morning, so bound to mess up at one point. But before we talk about the change at number 1, let's get through the others first. North Polk, I think they're a proven contender at this point. Beating up on Carlisle, really putting it to the Wildcats. Isaac Zosky, 14 for 18, 267 through the air, and 4 touchdowns. And they get a fun one this week against 3A Power Webster City. There's a ton of good matchups this week across the scope in high school football, and that's one of them, North Polk, Webster City. At number 4, Isaac Zosky from North Polk had a heck of a week, but I think it's going to get shadowed by Kyler Girardi. We've talked about him before. We're going to continue to do it as long as he's putting up video game like numbers. And how's this stat line? 16 for 18 through the air for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns, but that's not it. 11 rushes for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, including a 70-yard touchdown run. Kyler Girardi is one of the more impressive players in the entire state, regardless of class, and he's a huge region. North Scott is at that number 4 spot, and they're going to get 2-0 Davenport Assumption next. Davenport Assumption, a top 10 team in 3A. That one's going to be a ton of fun, and we're going to have our eyes on that one. And who knows, with the way the Instagram comments are piling up right now, I might be at that game. So we will see. It's going to be a ton of fun. But Kyler Girardi, he's worth the price of admission alone in that game. How about number 3, Western Dubuque? It feels like this team just is quietly rising, just way over on the east side of the state. They just keep climbing in our polls, and last week was no different. Tanner Anderson had 182 yards and a touchdown through the air, and Grant Glouser 24 rush attempts, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. And how about a number 3 versus number 2 matchup in Class 4A this week? Yes, that is correct. Western Dubuque and Xavier get a score off, and that'll lead right into Xavier at number 2. They lost to Williamsburg in a heartbreaker. There's no doubt that hurt, but there is positives. And for one, Colton Beasler Weber proved himself as an every down star back in Class 4A. How about 216 rushing yards on 29 carries? And the other good news, your Xavier, you lose to Williamsburg, you lose your top spot, but you get a chance this week to come out and be a top 3 team in Class 4A. You don't get those opportunities very much, and they get a chance to do that. Again, Western Dubuque and Cedar Rapids Xavier this week in Class 4A. Just another one of our great matchups we have across all classes in week 3 across the state of Iowa. But the big news in Class 4A, a new number 1, our second new number 1 across all classes this week is the ADM Tigers. And these guys are just insane. Obviously, they get this promotion with Xavier losing, but ADM is well deserving of a number 1 spot. Again, just last year they lost, and this time I was in Class 3A. They get their promotion to Class 4A, and now they're number 1, and rightfully so. And their 49-27 victory over Winterset. Aiden Flora threw for 261 and rushed for another 197 with 5 total touchdowns. Again, Aiden Flora, one of the elite playmakers in the state of Iowa. And it's kind of crazy to say, but it feels like he kind of shadows Brevin Dole, the Iowa commit, who also had a quiet 167 on the ground. I don't know how you can have a quiet 167 on the ground, but Aiden Flora's numbers just pop off the page so much you kind of forget that ADM has an Iowa Hawkeye football commit also touching the ball. So again, that duo of Aiden Flora and Brevin Dole is an insane duo. They're going to be extremely tough to stop all year, and they got so many other playmakers besides those two. Those two just make the headlines week in and week out. And I mean, that's another fun matchup. Speaking of ADM and Lewis Central, I mean, number 1 versus number 7, Lewis Central obviously going to be looking to bounce back. Lewis Central doesn't lose their Crescent, and this is a top 3 matchup, 1 versus 3. But obviously, Lewis Central losing, they're going to want to bounce back. They're going to come into Adele with a vengeance and want to make a statement. And ADM, obviously, their first week as number 1 in our IA football polls. So, I mean, 4A is just a madhouse right now, and what we thought was Xavier's to lose is now anyone's to gain. I mean, you got Bondurant with Cram, you got Lewis Central, the perennial, you got North Polk rising, North Scott with Kyler Girardi, Western Dubuque just continually climbing in our polls, and then obviously Xavier and ADM. This class is opening up more and more week to week, and there's just so many stars and a long ways to go. So we're going to let the games play itself, and we're going to continue to pump out rankings and content for you guys. But this class is a ton of fun to cover, and we're excited to follow it this week and the rest of the way. But be sure to follow IA Football and IA Sports across all social medias, and leave a comment. What do you think? Do you think Xavier should have lost the 1 spot? Do you think someone else should have been higher? Who's a team we need to keep an eye on that's not in our top 16? I mean, we want to hear from you guys. Be sure to leave a comment and let us know how we did. But nevertheless, we appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I hope you have a good Labor Day. See you guys later.